Hello friends, I have some news for you. Time is broken. Let me explain. It was just an ordinary day in the life of an ordinary scientist. He had discovered some obscure particle in the quantum foam of spacetime, something that didn't fit into the standard model of particle physics. His colleagues barely acknowledged his discovery, let alone cared about it. And so our scientist continued his research alone. One evening, while sifting through data, he picked up an unusual radio signal, one that definitely did not come from this world. After cleaning the signal and amplifying it, he heard a voice. But who was it? Was it aliens trying to contact us? Had we finally not been alone in the universe all along? When he heard the voice, the scientist's heart skipped a beat. Because it wasn't alien at all, the voice was distinctly human. What's more, the voice spoke in his native language, Russian. "Attention," the voice said. "This is an automated distress call. If you are receiving this message, it means the worst-case scenario has occurred. Our instruments suggest the beginning of the heat death of the universe. You must believe me. This is not a drill. In 48 hours, your solar system will cease to exist. So this message may be the last transmission from our world. We don't know what caused it or how to stop it, but we do know one thing. The reason we were unable to stop this process was the discovery of the Higgs boson. Apparently, when the Large Hadron Collider was working, it should not have been doing that. Do not repeat our mistakes." Then, the transmission cut off. The scientist sat there for a long time thinking, what does this mean? Did someone make a mistake by launching the Large Hadron Collider? Why would they sabotage the whole universe? But the main question was, where was the message coming from? Because according to physics laws, nothing can travel faster than light, let alone reverse time and send a message to the past. But there was a tiny loophole in this story. The message didn't say it was sent from the future, only that it was sent from a parallel world. So, technically, it could have been sent from any planet in the multiverse. But then he realized the main thing. The message said that in 48 hours, the solar system would cease to exist. But that would mean that right now, somewhere out there, people are living their everyday lives, drinking coffee and tea, playing with their kids and pets. And then, bam, in 48 hours, all of them will die. Well, maybe not all of them. Maybe those people will live on, but they won't remember anything. Their memories will be erased. The world will forget everything that ever happened before. And then it hit him like a bolt from the blue. It's not a message from a parallel world. It's a message from my future. Or, rather, from my past. Because if we rewrite history, the future will change, which means the laws of physics will also change. But physics says nothing can travel faster than light, which means this message broke the laws of physics. If the message came from his future, then it shouldn't even exist, because in his future, there shouldn't be anyone to send it. The scientist thought hard. How could this be possible? He recalled the moment he received the mysterious transmission. At first, he thought it was aliens. That's why he used his radio telescope to listen to the stars. But the telescope couldn't pick up anything except the same repeating message. He decided to go back to the very beginning of the recording and start listening carefully. Could there be some details he missed? Of course, he could just ignore all of this and continue living his usual life, pretend he never heard that recording, and maybe everything would be fine. Maybe his future would turn out to be a little different, and there would unbeat any heat death of the universe. But would he really be able to do that? After all, the whole universe was at stake. And most importantly, he felt responsible for what was happening. Because he was the one who discovered that Higgs, which apparently caused all these problems. So the scientist listened to the recording again. This time, he heard something new. In the background, barely audible under the noise of the cosmos, he heard the faint sounds of a city. Cars, sirens, construction work, and people talking. And all of a sudden, he recognized that melody. It was the sound of his city. It turned out that the place where the message originated was just 20 light years away. The scientist quickly packed his things and left for the nearest observatory. He had to get closer to that anomaly and see what was going on there. Now it was clear that this was not a message from an alien planet, but a message from his future. And this future was very close. At the observatory, the scientist tuned the telescope to the exact frequency of that transmission. All night long, he tried to establish communication with the source of the signal, but it was in vain. All he saw was a blurry spot in the sky, which seemed to be some kind of star. But then the sky cleared up a bit, and the scientist saw a strange cloud of gas and dust. And right in the center of that cloud was a small planet similar to Earth. It was clear that the planet was sending a distress signal. But how could they hear him on this distant planet? There was only one way to find out. The scientist knew that it was dangerous to approach the anomaly, but he still decided to take a risk. He took his spaceship and headed towards the cloud. He set the autopilot and went to sleep, dreaming that he would soon make contact with his future self. When he woke up, the ship's alarm went off. The autopilot couldn't navigate because the sensors picked up interference. Looking out the porthole, the scientist realized that the readings were off, because the space around the ship was filled with a thick fog. And then he noticed that the planet from the telescope was much closer now. Then the scientist remembered the voice from the transmission saying that the worst-case scenario had occurred. The laws of physics stopped working. Perhaps that's why he saw that cloud of gas and dust. It was a wormhole. But how could he get out of there if it was unstable? The answer was simple. It was closing. Suddenly, the alarms went off again. The engines failed. The scientist cursed. He tried to restart the engines, but it was no use. The ship was slowly losing altitude and would crash into that planet in a few minutes. But then the scientist noticed a small hole in the fog and decided to try his luck. He aimed the ship at the opening and pressed the thrusters. The ship jerked sharply, but it managed to break out of the wormhole. But where did it take him? It turned out that the scientist ended up on that same planet from the transmission. On its surface, everything looked like a regular terrestrial planet. There were mountains, rivers, and forests. But there were no people anywhere. It was like a ghost town. The scientist landed his ship and got out onto the planet's surface. Right in front of him was a huge city, just like in the transmission. But there were no cars or people on the streets. Everything was eerily quiet. It was as if the city's inhabitants had disappeared without a trace. But the most surprising thing was that the air was filled with the same sounds that the scientists heard in the transmission. People were walking, cars were driving, there was construction work and sirens in the distance. And suddenly the scientist understood where he was. This was not a planet. This was Earth, but in his future, he looked up at the sky and realized that the sun was blotted out by a thick gray cloud. The planet was dying. But why? The scientist took out his phone and found out the date. It was 2 days after the supposed heat death of the universe. So what happened? Why didn't the world end? The scientist was stunned. He understood that he was the one who sent that message to the past. But how could he have done that? The answer was inside that message itself. The voice said that the worst-case scenario had occurred, meaning that the heat death of the universe actually happened. But the scientist changed his future. By traveling back in time, he made the timeline split. Now there were 2 timelines existing simultaneously. In one of them, the scientist's discovery led to the heat death of the universe, and in the other timeline, he managed to prevent it. But that raised another. Who was the voice in the transmission? Who was the scientist talking to? Was it his future self who sent a message to himself? Then the scientist noticed a person filming him on their phone. The person was standing on a nearby hill. They waved to him and walked away. The scientist watched them go. Suddenly, he realized who it was. It was him. It was his future self. The scientist was horrified. He had seen his future, and it wasn't bright. The universe might have been saved, but he himself doomed to wander through time in search of a way to fix everything. But then the scientist thought, no, I'll manage. After all, he's already managed to travel through time once. He'll figure it out. Friends, I have some good news for you. Time is working properly. The scientist managed to fix everything. Thank goodness. But it looks like the void between timelines is starting to collapse. Oh, no. What will happen next? Find out in the next video. See you soon.